Welcome, everybody, to Hardpoints, a podcast about energy security and the startup economy and how they intersect to shape the world around us. Each week, we unpack the real dynamics behind the headlines, what's changing, what it means, and, of course, why it matters to you. Thanks for being here. Neil, how you doing?
Doing well. It's been a busy week. Spent last weekend with my great uncle who turned 102. So that was a bit crazy, but we got back and jumped right into the week, and it's been busy. Getting ready for summer.
Yeah, I'm feeling that. It's weird. Like, you think that like summers are relaxed, like it's like when you were a kid, but now that when you have kids, it's a totally different thing. Like, actually, summer is the busy period in some ways for parents.
Yeah, because, well, bluntly, the school looks after them from about 8:30 to, almost 3. And then in the summer, you got to figure out who's going to watch them during that time. And we're going to do a camp here or there. We're going to, find creative things, but that's a puzzle I got to piece together. Grandma's going to take them for a bit, and I got to camp. And anyways, it's just something I got to figure out.
Yeah, that's one of the things that we've been working on. I'm actually really excited. My son, so he's going into middle school next year, and the school has like a fairly interesting regimentation that they have to like all their classes. They have a way of doing things, and I think it's going to serve him well. But they actually have like almost like a boot camp kind of thing for him during the summer. It's meant to be fun. It's, they're not pushing deck like they're a bunch of, 18-year-olds going into the Marine Corps.
Okay. No push-ups. Okay.
Yeah, I don't think so, but we'll find out. So it's kind of interesting to see this kid get like excited about like going to school in the summer. Where I think if it had been me, I would have been like, man, I don't want my own piece of this noise. Like, let me go like have my own days to myself. Right.
Yeah. Well, in putting that all together, I sort of looked at, you can do soccer and baseball, and we might do some of that. There's also coding and like, really, sort of geeky stuff. And I was really excited that he's mostly into sports, but he got really excited about the coding one. And so I think I'm going to do that just because if he's got a little excitement about it, whether he turns out to be a software engineer in the future or not, having a little foundation of that is gold.
I had a classmate of mine at the academy and a squadron mate of mine in Japan who said that all the fighter pilots that we were with were either on the cool side of nerd or on the nerd side of cool. So the jock
I'll take that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think I would say I was on the cool side of nerd. Like at my core, I'm kind of a nerdy dude. So I was the coolest of the nerds, if you will.
But the flight suit makes you look cool, man. You can't be uncool when you're wearing a flight suit.
Lipstick on a pig in this case, but yeah, man, that's but yeah, it's great to see a kid that is an athlete that wants to pick up a little bit of coding, or my kid that's like interested in becoming a runner, and you're like, okay, dude, right, go get it.
Yeah, man. I'm glad my running days are over. I was never a very good runner in the first place, but yeah, my ankles do not appreciate running anymore. So good on him. He can have it.
Yeah, well, he's got the frame for it. He's tall and lean, and he's just like constantly moving. Like he's my wife and I joke about that. Like he's like a shark that if you stop moving, he might die. So I'm like, yeah, go run, dude.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. Yeah, my little ones tend to come alive after about right at bedtime. They're okay, pretty normal most of the time. When it comes to bedtime, then they're like amazingly have all this energy and have to run around the house, breaking things and making a ruckus. Really, really coincidental.
It's funny how that works. So, all right, man, how about we get into the news?
Sounds good.
All right, everybody, if you haven't binged TikTok yet, here's the news you need. Today, we're going to be talking about a Molotov-fueled hate crime in Boulder, Colorado, Canada's wildfires choking the Midwest, Ukraine's really slick drone raid on Russia, and Washington's latest blow to our cyber defenses. So let's roll. First thing to talk about here, Boulder's Molotov cocktail meltdown. Picture yourself a sunny Boulder morning. Pro-Israel marchers are hitting the streets in a run for your lives march, and suddenly a guy lobs a couple of Molotov cocktails at the Jewish participants. Absolute chaos. The suspect, a 45-year-old Egyptian immigrant named Mohammed Solomon, allegedly screamed "Free Palestine" as he threw the flaming bottles. 12 marchers were injured. 8 ended up in the hospital, including an 88-year-old Holocaust survivor. He apparently had another 16 not the Holocaust survivor, but the attacker had another 16 Molotovs in reserve, but been unable to purchase a gun due to background checks. One additional kicker: Solomon's visa expired in 2023, so he was in the country illegally. Now ICE has detained his wife and his 5 children, even though his daughter's headed off to college, and the reason he had waited his attack was to get her off to school. So because even though the family was fully cooperating, apparently family guilt is totally in season. Legal experts are crying foul over the expedited removal without court hearings. Local officials are pointing fingers at immigration loopholes. Bottom line, it's a hot mess, and terror charges plus deportation create a lot of drama. Second story of the day is we're going to be talking about Canadian wildfires. Smoke is invading the United States as Canada is burning again. Wildfires have raised almost 4,000 square miles across Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba, forcing tens of thousands of people to evacuate. The smoke plume is stretching into the United States, Midwest especially, turning Minneapolis's air quality index into a fire-breathing dragon of hazardous levels. Hospitals in Minnesota report a spike in respiratory visits, and offices in Chicago are asking people to stay indoors. So I guess that's just an excuse to skip the gym. Ski towns here in Colorado are starting to see some hazy sunrises, and N95 masks are back trending across the United States. It's a grim reminder that when our northern neighbors ignite, our lungs pay the price, and the underlying cause is a climate that won't support where forests are now and won't be in the future. Our third story of the day is about an incredible attack. Ukraine doing a drone surprise party, if you will. Over in Eastern Europe, Ukraine pulled off, quote, Operation Spiderweb. It involved the smuggling of 117 FPV drones. They were smuggled into Russia via freight containers, straight to 5 different Russian bomber bases. Reports say about 40 strategic bombers, those Tu-95s and Tu-22s, got torched or damaged. Russia plays it cool, but satellite images and social media tell a totally different story. Rows of smoking wreckage and a bunch of freaked out Russians. So why should you care? Well, it's because each drone cost about $400, was made in China, and our Congress is cutting battery and rare earth mining incentives, giving China the drone tech edge. Put simply, adversaries can mass produce swarms cheaper than we can. And if you think silicon shortage memes are bad, wait till you need a battery for a swarm of kamikaze drones over the Pacific. Our final thing is to talk about today is the Big Beautiful Bill, or the BBB, gutting cybersecurity. So you may have been hearing in the news about this Big Beautiful Bill, according to, is so given the name by President Trump. It is Congress's flex that slashes cybersecurity and the Information Security Agency, or CISA, by 17% as one of the things that does there. That's going to save the government about $500 million in theory, and chops roughly about 1,000 jobs, according to reporting from Cybersecurity Drive. The people at CISA are those who watch your bank, your power grid, and election systems 24/7. With fewer analysts and fewer threat hunters, expect nation-state hackers, such as our friends, or not friends, Russia and China, to get a bit bolder. Lawmakers say CISA drifted into election politics, but critics warn that this is inviting a big future cyber blackout. So just imagine your favorite app going dark because someone clicked a phishing link, except for that's like the entire economy. So that's on the table. And that is the news you need. It's Boulder's fiery hate crimes, Canada's smoke soup, Ukraine's mic drop of a drone attack, and Congress's punching holes in our cyber shield. A lot going on there, Neil, huh?
Oh my gosh. I don't know. I mean, the terror attack is awful, and violence is to be. Yeah, I mean, this guy doing what he did. I mean, my first thought is like, what do these people have to do with it? You know, they're nothing is the answer. This is a peaceful community that happens to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, and this is an awful human that, you know, like, he has the humanity to get his daughter off to college, and then the barbarism to to do something awful to people he doesn't know. I just, it's abhorrent and ridiculous.
Yeah, there's not much more to say about the attack itself, right? Which is that it is, I think, correctly labeled as terrorism. It
Yeah.
was violence for political outcomes, not necessarily. And so, thankfully, it looks like everybody's going to survive, but it's a scary thing. A lot of weird shit has been happening in Boulder. That's just up the road from us here in Denver.
Mm.
Um, Mass shootings, you had that. Yeah, and all of it seems kind of unconnected. And so I think is Boulder is really just representative of a lot of weird shit that's happening in our country more broadly. Um,
Mm.
there also seemed to be a lot in there for like everybody to get pissed off about.
Yeah.
So like
Yeah.
it's a guy that's here illegally, um, but
Yeah.
he was prevented from a mass shooting event because he wasn't able to purchase a firearm. So like, yay. Uh,
Yeah. I guess.
but then there's also like his wife and kids are being like deported immediately, and as from all and everything that everybody's read is like they're actually pretty innocent of the whole thing. It's like what the
Yeah.
whole thing's just a hot mess.
Yeah. It's knee jerk and it's just going to make it worse. Right. I mean, I understand the outrage. I'm outraged. I'm glad that, I mean, he could have found a weapon if he really wanted to. Let's be honest. But I'm glad the system seems to have prevented him from doing so. I am, but I'll say like the deportation piece is just, it sounds good, but what does it accomplish? Like, what does it actually do? And like it's a distraction from the real issue, which is this individual who took, extreme steps for horrible purposes.
Yeah, I don't think there's much more to talk about there. Yeah. Any thoughts about the wildfires in Canada?
Yeah, I lived through the sort of red skies in California a few years ago. It is wild. And it, I mean, we've said this several times in this show, climate change is here. I mean, it's one of the markers of it being in our faces all the time is this, this smoke cloud. These fires are burning hundreds of miles away, and but it's so massive that the smoke can impact people in other countries, not just other states, but other countries. It's, it's another stark reminder that we just can't ignore this problem. I know a lot of people want to. It's just something that cannot be set aside. We got to address it.
Yeah, it's pretty near and dear to my heart. As my first company that I founded was about post-fire landscapes and reforesting them where appropriate. And when I got started in this, it was based on a wildfire I had experience within it when I was a kid. It was like 44,000 acres, and when I was a kid, it felt like the whole state was on fire. Like I was really, but that's like so minuscule compared to what's happening now. And so like we've just become like comfortable with like every year, every other year, like tens of thousands of people are going to have to be evacuated for massive, destroying fires that like are ravaging the landscape. And so it's, I guess the part that's shocking to me is how comfortable we've all gotten so quickly about this being normal, because it's not. Like this didn't happen. And I'm not going to be the old man who's like back when I was a kid, but kind of, I'm not that old, but like I've got kids that are,
definitely a more recent phenomenon for sure.
How did we get so comfortable with the idea that like, it's cool if huge fires are burning across the landscape? It's just kind of surprises me we don't freak out about it as much as we used to. It's just normal now.
Yeah. Well, I guess my take would be the people who don't see the smoke are definitely don't care. It's the people who are like, oh, wait, I can't go outside today because it's too smoky because the air quality is crappy and my kids are being told that they shouldn't go outside and run around. That was the case on several occasions in California a few years ago. And, we're now getting warnings like that again from the fires in Canada. I understand. I'm focused on my own life too, but it's much easier to ignore if it doesn't impact your life. Um, it's when you, yeah, when your kid's coughing because there's smoke in the air, that brings it closer to home.
Yeah. Well, maybe we can talk about fires that are I'm more excited about, which is those of burning Russian strategic bombers. Like,
Hell yeah.
what a cool story that is.
Yeah, hats off to them, man. I mean, especially as somebody who's been in the business of blowing shit up, I am really impressed. I'll start with that. I'm just really impressed that they pulled this off. I want to acknowledge off the bat that it's strategic. This actually helps America from the jump. Some of these bombers are strategic nuclear delivery platforms. I don't know exactly how many they have, but Ukraine just knocked out a few of them, which is important vis-a-vis what America's nuclear deterrence.
I heard there's like a third of the fleet, like something like a third of the Russian bomber fleet, like was in one operation taken out.
That's amazing. And what I do know is that they're not making these bombers anymore. They don't have an active production line, so it's not like they're going to replace these bombers overnight. Second thing is these are the same assets. The reason they went after these assets is because this is the platforms where they launch the cruise missiles from, that are the missiles that can get deep into Ukraine, are launched from these platforms. So this wasn't just a, hey, I'm going to degrade Russian overall military capability. This is like, here are assets that are attacking us. We're going to go get after those specific assets. We can't shoot them down because they're operating hundreds of miles into Russia. But when they're sitting on the ground on a Russian airbase, we can get to them then. So again, very targeted, and again, super impressive.
Yeah, the Ukrainians are continuing to revolutionize warfare. It's just so impressive, like what they've been able to pull off, and you kind of wonder, like, uh, like what else can they do? Like if you're a Russian official, you've got to be afraid for your life at this point, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
they can get you. They can reach out deep into the world's largest country by landmass and get
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. Well, it might also be worth mentioning why, at least I won't speak for you, but why I'm so pro Ukraine. To me, this is the central issue that opens up uh, a a floodgate of bad outcomes if Russia is successful in their campaign. So, I have been vocal in support of Ukraine in part because it's just a U.S. interest. China is watching. If Ukraine goes down because Russia just, in today's day and age, can just roll across the border and roll into Kiev and take over Ukraine, one, they're not going to stop there. Two, it makes the rest of Europe all the more unstable, and that's bad for America. There's a 3, 4, and 5, but I'll just hit number 3, which is that China has been waiting to invade Taiwan for a long time. And the reason they have it is because the United States has said, we're going to come to Taiwan's aid. Whether you believe that or not, is an open question. I think it's probably pretty safe to say that Trump probably wouldn't do that. I think some could argue that Biden wouldn't have done that. But we at least have said it as our policy. And if China rolls into Taiwan, that's another sort of just, one, we get a lot of critical supply chain, computer chips in particular from Taiwan, but we get other critical supply chain components from there as well, electronic components, et cetera. So it starts a chain of events that is really, really bad for American security, really bad for America. Anyway, I just use that as an explanation for why we're such vocal cheerleaders for Ukraine. At least I am, is that I see this attack as a step in the right direction. It's still no end in sight for the war, but if there's a light at the end of the tunnel that Ukraine could actually prevail in this conflict, I'm all for it, which is why, one, on the tactical front, as we said, we're really impressed. But two, if this means that Ukraine is not going to get rolled by Russia, then that's good for American security.
Yeah. For me, it's just a little all those things are true. I agree with all of them. For me, the core issue is like I want to believe my country's the good guys, and the good guys are the ones that stand up for free people to not be invaded. And Ukraine was a free people with free and fair elections, and they were invaded by a hostile neighbor. Uh, when I was a kid, we went and freed Kuwait from the actions of a murderous dictator named Saddam Hussein. And that was, in some ways, the last pure war the U.S. has had, right? Like the rest of it got a lot sloppier. Um, and so I want to be the good guys. I want to be supporting. I want to be supporting Ukraine, and any anybody that's not an absolute troll of a human being knows that Ukraine are the good guys in this fight. And so I'd love to see them doing that. It also made me think about this is I'm going to nerd out here on military history about Billy Mitchell. Um, are you or how familiar are you with kind of Billy? Yeah. So Billy Mitchell, for everybody listening at home, was this general in the U.S. Army in the kind of the interwar period between World War One and World War Two. That was just ranting and raving to everybody that listened to him about how important air power was to the battlefield. But nobody really listened to him, and so he set up, and near and dear to my Navy heart here, he set up this demonstration of these two old German battleships that were war prizes from the First World War, and he anchored them off the coast of North Carolina, and he brought the Navy out there, like all these admirals for the Navy, the brass, and his flimsy little airplanes. They were all like, yeah, this is whatever, no chance in hell. And he ended up sinking these battleships, like the most like concrete example of like my little planes are going to sink your big ass battleships, and this is how a war is going to be fought in the future. And the Navy promptly ignored him, as did most of the Army, and then we all learned the really, really hard way at World War II about in World War II during Pearl Harbor and essentially the entire Pacific campaign as well as the Battle of Europe about how critical air power is to the modern battle space. And so it makes me think a little bit about like I think we just had our Billy Mitchell moment when it comes to drones. Like we'd been seeing this, there'd been evidence of it like happening in Ukraine, but like this is like the you can't avoid drone conversation. The question is will we, even though we can't avoid it, can put our head in the sand like like the Navy brass did after Billy Mitchell's battleship sinking. So I don't know. You have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, there's a couple things. One is the current military is way behind. The current U.S. military is way behind. I mean, February 2022, when Russia invaded Ukraine and Ukraine started fighting back with drones, the face of battle changed again. And you would hope that the U.S. military would adapt. It's been 4 years now, almost 3.5 years, I guess. And look, we need to adapt, and we're not adapting fast enough. Now, there are private companies out there that are building very capable drones and anti-drone technology, and also companies out there that are building drone swarm technology. So not just one drone acting alone, but hundreds potentially of drones acting alone. So Shield AI is the sort of most notable of those drone swarm technologies. So there's technology being developed. So it's two sides of the coin. I'm sort of see that there's potential for the U.S. military to adopt some of this coming technology. I'm really disappointed that we haven't gotten some of it already implemented. That's just a function of how we acquire things and how we change training doctrine, et cetera. It's a big ship and takes a lot to turn it. But man, warfare happens fast. And I think if we had to go to war tomorrow, and that's the sort of Marine coming out of me, we're always ready. That's the sort of mantra of being in the military, being a Marine. We're not ready right now. I think we'll get there. Fine. We're not ready right now.
Yeah, there's a procurement process that's just like bogging down. This is one place where like I actually do wish the Trump administration a great deal of success. They'll probably use it in order to enrich themselves pretty massively, just based upon the people that are doing it. But nonetheless, like we got to be able to field new technologies a lot more quickly and to innovate and to operate a lot faster. Like the
Yeah.
process that it takes
Yeah.
to, you know, it'll take us 20 years to get the sixth generation, the next generation air defense fighter out there. Like 20 years for that. Like, are you what? Like,
Yeah. It's not working right now. I will say that there are signs that we're getting better. The Defense Innovation Unit, for example, the AFWorks program. There are efforts underway to bring in new technologies more quickly. Not a perfect system. It's getting better incrementally, sort of, as they say, at the speed of government. I'm, encouraged that the proposal, anyway, part of what's in this gigantic defense budget in the quote unquote big, beautiful bill is increased funding for the onboarding of new tech. So, like, look, there's signs that we can get better, but it's not happening now. If you look at the vast majority of dollars are still spent in, the top 3 or 4 companies. That's, the primes as they are, like, Northrop Grumman, Boeing, et cetera. So, I will say, the first step in solving any problem is recognition that you have a problem. I think the military, the DoD has recognized the problem. There's some solutions out there. And a couple weeks ago, we gave HegSeth and the DoD some credit for some potential reorganizations that are underway. I think that's immensely positive. So I'm hopeful that we keep heading in a positive direction. But with my negative pants on, I'll say, yeah, I hope we don't have to go to war tomorrow.
yeah, you and me both. It also makes me think a little bit more about like the kind of the work that you're doing there at Heirloom as well, which is like if a container full of drones can be shipped and take out a third of the Russian bomber fleet. We have containers moving around this country. We have bombers that are in the middle of this
Oh
country,
yeah, we're
and
so
so
vulnerable.
yeah, so
We have this mindset that the oceans are going to protect us, right? The Pacific and the Atlantic Oceans insulate us, and we got friendlies to the north and south. Yeah, no, that's not true anymore. It's just not.
yeah, so yeah, about how we need to start hardening domestic infrastructure. And it reminds me a little bit about the idea of 9/11 that we came to realize that like these asymmetric threats for that you could turn a domestic plane into a missile and drop famous buildings into rubble like that was kind of a wake up moment. And so the hope that I have here is that there is a whole of government response about like how do we harden our infrastructure across all the phases there. I'm not super confident that's going to happen based upon the acts that's happening, in our fourth story there around getting cybersecurity. And I know we're going to be talking to a 10-pound brain in this subject here in a little bit. So yeah, what do you think about like the cybersecurity cuts?
I mean, look. This is the front line. I don't know how you take out this kind of critical capability at a time when we are actively under attack. You look at the sort of hacking that's already occurred at multiple agencies within the federal government, and the cyber warfare that is ongoing every day. My buddies that work in cyber, um, like it's easy to pretend like it's not there because it's sort of like the climate change story we were talking about before with the fires. If you don't see it, it doesn't affect you. Maybe it doesn't exist. But in this case, there's constant nation state actors attacking U.S. Critical infrastructure, defense infrastructure, communications infrastructure continuously, so that we would weaken ourselves in this way. Look, all I can hope is that they've got another plan. that they take it out of this agency that they don't like for political purposes and put it in somewhere else. I have to hope that that's the case, because otherwise, what the fuck are you doing?
Yeah, $500 million is a lot of money. There's a famous Tip O'Neill quote, like you start talking about a billion here, a billion there. It's now we're talking about real money. But in the scope of what the is spent on U.S. national defense, which is somewhere in the ballpark of like $1 trillion plus every year, if you include DoD budget plus intelligence plus all the rest of that, like this would not seem to be the most prudent place to cut $500 million out of that. And to give a sense of like just some quick math in public, that if it's $1 trillion budget, that would be 1/2000th of the total security budget. So
I don't know, man. It is, I know it's our job as military guys the quote, sorry, I didn't say it before, but the Marine quote is be most ready when the nation is least ready. So I guess that's our sort of, our lot in life, is to be paranoid a bit. And I used to say I got paid to be paranoid. I don't know. As I say, I hope they have another plan.
Yeah. Fingers crossed. Well, speaking of cybersecurity, you want to introduce our guest for today?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to talk to this guy. I've known him for a while. Mike McNerney. He's an Air Force vet. Speaking of military guys, he was in intelligence, and after the Air Force transitioned out, he's a tech leader. He's been working in cyber for a long time. He's also done a bunch of good work on the political scene, sort of active in the Democratic politics space, sort of way above my pay grade. I call him when I have questions about how things work and who's doing what. And he's been sort of on the inside of political battles as far back as about 10 years ago. He's a trained lawyer. He went to law school. He's also on a couple of nonprofit boards and does some good work on nuclear non-proliferation and that. So excited to talk to him. Especially given this week with the drone attack and with this cyber budget getting cut, et cetera. I think he'll have some good insights for us. So let's get going.
All right. Let's see it.
Mike McNerney, welcome to Hardpoints.
Hey, dude. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Well, so you're an Air Force vet. You're a tech leader. You've worked in cybersecurity and politics. You've been at the heart of some of our recent political battles, but I want to start with what we're wrestling with right now, which is this attack that Ukraine launched deep into Russia, and sort of get your take on sort of how they pulled this thing off. They seem to continue to impress. How did this come down to what seemingly is a distributed command and control and successful attack?
Yeah. So leading with the easy questions right off the bat, Neil.
Yeah, right.
Look, a lot of the details from this, I think, are still coming out. There's a lot that's not known. What we do know, I think, is fascinating. I've been thinking a lot about this over the last couple of days. It sounds like, I think, a lot of people, including you guys, have as well. From what we do understand, this is an operation that they called Operation Spiderweb, and it took place, at least in the planning stages, over the course of many months, maybe up to a year. And what essentially happened is the Ukrainian Secret Service or Special Forces, a clandestine service, infiltrated the Russian country with drones hidden in containers, possibly in the backs of trucks and things like that, positioned them outside of military bases, and then upon a certain cue, opened the hatches of these containers, and then these kind of drones came out and started attacking and blowing up Russian strategic aircraft. So I think that's kind of what happened in a nutshell. What's really interesting to me is the fact that this happened at all, right? What does that say that these guys were able to pull this off? And you guys are both, former pilots. I can't imagine what it would take to say, look, we're about to launch a strike on Russian strategic bombers in Russia. what would it take to do that, right? I mean, you probably know better than me how difficult something like that would be.
Impossible.
Well, I mean, the pre-positioning part gets me. Of like, how do you get the containers? And I understand it was sort of a Russian doll kind of thing, where it was a container inside of a container. But how do you get that hundreds of miles in Siberia without Russia knowing about it? And then how do you get it all to queue on the same timeline? Or how do you do the targeting, the last minute targeting, to make sure these things are actually hitting their intended objectives?
Yeah, I think, a lot of these things, the most impressive part is the logistics and the planning, right? The strike part of it is usually the end, and it's impressive, but it's really not the biggest part of this operation. To me, I think it says a couple things. It says, first of all, the Ukrainian special operations forces are world class. I mean, we talk about U.S., we talk about Israelis, we talk about others, and it's clear that the Ukrainians are right up there among the best in the world at what they do. I don't know if you guys saw, they just blew up the bridge outside Crimea again in an operation that took over a year to plan and position. So they're quite serious. I think they have also taken the gloves off, right? Clearly, they've had this kind of capability and have held it at bay for some reason. And now we're like, okay, well, let's go ahead and step it up. We can talk about why that is, but go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I mean, it's to some level, I'm also just impressed that they were able to keep an operation of this scale secret for, as you say, it's been you don't plan this in a week. This has been months, maybe more than a year. How do you keep something of this breadth under wraps for so long? I don't know that you could do that in America. Maybe.
I mean, regarding the United States, I do think that, intelligence sharing goes a little bit both ways, right? If we stop sharing with them, I'm sure they're not going to tell us about this kind of stuff that they're doing. So that probably helps with the secrecy.
So more conceptual here, but I've said before that, drones, when, February, March of 22, warfare changed again. You sort of harken it back to, at some point somebody had a 2-foot sword and then somebody came up with a 3-foot sword, and we've been in a cat and mouse game ever since. Ukraine proved that warfare has changed, to me, fundamentally yet again. Do you see that the same way, that we're really in a step change now from what was before February 22 till after?
Oh yeah, I definitely do. I think it's, how would I say it? Like, it's almost more creative now, right? I mean, these drones aren't exactly like the cutting edge of military technology, worth billions of dollars a piece. I mean, they're pretty homebrewed in many cases, not very expensive, certainly by military, equipment standards. And so it's not just the equipment or the technology, but it's how they're using them, the creativity, the planning, right? The thought process, the intelligence, all of this that is being used in ways that we haven't used them or seen them used before. And I think what's sobering for us in the United States is, we kind of invented these things, right? We invented military drones, literally, right? Predators and Reapers and things like that. And we are clearly behind the game, right? Both in the acquisition and fielding of these things, but also just in the understanding of how you can use a drone and a truck to do something that is strategic, right? I mean, attacking Russian bombers in Russia is a strategic move, not a little tactical move. I think it's absolutely astounding.
It strikes to me as like the Billy Mitchell moment, which is the idea
Yes.
of like, this technology has been around. It's nothing new. It's new-ish, but really the problem that is that people need to adapt to how this technology fits into the battle space.
I think so. And what strikes me about this is that I think the Ukrainians are on the leading edge of developing this stuff because they have to be, right? They have to be creative because they don't have the numbers of people. They don't have the mass, and they don't have the money or the infrastructure to buy long range bombers like we or the Russians do. And so they have to be creative in a way that, honestly, like, we really don't have to be that creative in the United States. We have so much firepower and so much in the way of resources that you can just kind of bulldoze your way in, right? Whereas they, if they want to win and survive, have to be creative.
Well, but if that's true, my question was going to be, could the U.S. pull this off? Meaning, could the U.S. deploy drones in this way in any great effect? and I guess what I want to add on to that is because we don't need to, as you say, we can just go build strategic assets. Is that the right answer? Like, are we going to be able to win a fight against, a capability like this, where you've got creative use of multiple cheap assets, when we're the, again, sort of other side of that counterinsurgency, just the big lumbering force?
Yeah, I think it advantages the smaller party, right? This is kind of an asymmetric tool. And so I would almost be more worried about us defending against this kind of attack instead of trying to recreate it ourselves, right? The scenarios that I envision are, you know, troops in places like Syria, right? Or, if we get into more of a heated confrontation with China, I mean, I'm sure they're watching this as well and saying, oh, why don't we just sneak some of these into some of the containers that we ship into U.S. ports? I mean, I'm a little bit more worried about, the safety of like Whiteman Air Force Base, right? Um, as more people see that this can be done, right? And it's cheap. And as long as you are creative and intelligent and put the work in, like, you can have a major, major impact. So I think the defensive side of this is a little bit more like hair on fire to me right now. And the offensive side is kind of like, okay, we can get there and we have other things that we can use to win
Yeah, I
wars.
think Whiteman's a kind of a great, for those unfamiliar, Whiteman Air Force Base is where the U.S. B-2 bomber fleet is maintained. A lot of them are out there just open on the ramp right now. Quite a few of them are in hangars. But even if you were to build hardened hangar structures for all these things, those planes have to fly. Drones are very quickly deployable, so they have to. You can't take off from a bunker. So, like, how do you even get airplanes to the runways without exposing them in these sort of scenarios? And so, it's the idea of hair on fire moment right now from a defensive capacity of like U.S. U.S. defense capabilities and the ability of actually protecting assets on domestic soil.
Yeah, yeah, precisely. Yeah, that I think that strikes me. And what other things are we not thinking about now because we just we haven't been thinking about them. Like, we're used to fighting either Cold War mentality, like fighting another nation state, right? Or we're used to fighting like in Iraq and Afghanistan, which is very much U.S. advantage versus a very relatively unsophisticated adversary. So, what are we not thinking about? What are we missing? And what could a reasonably well resourced, determined, very clever adversary do to have an asymmetric advantage over the United States?
Well, in that spirit, one of the other things I wanted to ask you about was there's a story recently about how there was spyware deployed on Chinese energy infrastructure, meaning Chinese built energy infrastructure that was deployed here in the United States. So an inverter for a solar power plant was built in China, had a layer of, I'll just call it spyware. So they're clearly listening and able to do at least a limited set of operations out of that inverter. This is maybe one of those scenarios you're just sort of alluding to.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of a terrifying thought. I would maybe take a little bit of issue with your characterization of it as espionage. And I'll tell you why. I think up until 2020, 2022, the bulk of what we saw from the Chinese and the People's Liberation Army was espionage, right? It was economic espionage primarily, right, aimed at helping steal things so that they could increase their defense capability, increase their own economy, right, begin to rival us as an economic and military power. And that's when you saw a lot of the data exfiltration and the plans for the F-35 and things like that were famously exfiltrated by the Chinese. More recently, we've seen an increase in espionage, right, or penetration of things like utilities and water treatment plants and solar panels. And I'm going to go out on a limb here and say there is no intelligence value in those solar panels, right? There is no intelligence value in a utility. That is operational preparation of the environment. There's no real other explanation for it. And I think what's even more sobering about that is that they have decided, and we catch these things, right? You just literally said, hey, we caught this. We know this is here. So that is potentially a burned access point now that they can no longer use. But they are willing to do it anyway, right? They are willing to put some number of resources into maintaining some level of persistent access in U.S. critical infrastructure, resources that they could be putting somewhere else. They could be putting that towards beating us in AI, but they're not. They're putting some percentage of their budget, their military budget, into maintaining these accesses. I can only guess, so that when Xi Jinping says go, they're ready, right? And they just constantly maintain that some level of access in our infrastructure. That's my take on it.
So if I'm just translating, what you're describing here is preparations of the battlefield.
That is my best guess for what
It's not about stealing information. It's actually about prepping for war.
Yeah, prepping for war, or just probably more likely would be like just causing chaos in the United States. If something were to happen over the Straits of Taiwan, for example, and they want to just paralyze the United States with chaos, they have these little logic bombs in critical infrastructure, and they set them off, and then the lights go off, and the water stops running, and Americans panic, and we can't get involved in that war. That's what I think they're doing.
So how is this happening right under our nose? And how is it that our political leadership isn't either paying attention or doing anything about it?
I think there are a couple answers for that. Part of it is that this is a change, as I mentioned, from kind of economic espionage to something a little bit more nefarious. And to be honest, there has been in some circles of the government this attitude that, like, look, if you get your IP stolen, like, that's your problem. Like, I'm not going to go to war with China because you can't configure a firewall, right? Like, so it's kind of like the private sector largely should defend this on their own with some government help, right? But this is a little bit different. You're talking about something that is arguably more dangerous, and also you're talking about entities that really can't defend themselves. I mean, utilities do not have the resources to like stand up massive security teams to fight the People's Liberation Army. They just don't. And so that's kind of an unfair fight. So I do think this is catching up to us a little bit. I think there was a threat actor called Volt Typhoon, which was in the news a lot, which is been attributed to the Chinese, and is about them kind of accessing U.S. critical infrastructure. To be honest, the folks at CISA, the Critical Infrastructure Security Agency, over the last 8 years or so, have done a great job of helping us get ahead of this threat. Really great job. Under the leadership of people like Chris Krebs and Jen Easterly. I mean, just really, really great. And they are kind of unsung heroes in this kind of fight. Unfortunately, CISA is being gutted right now.
No way.
They are
like doged,
flashed, and people are being fired and laid off and quit. And so their capability, maybe as of this moment is kind of okay, but like I would be worried about their ability to continue to protect us from this threat in the future. Because this agency, CISA, falls under Homeland Security. Like, this is their job, is to protect the homeland. And so gutting them is problematic.
That's craziness. Yeah, I'm not even sure I know what to say to that. That in the midst of what is clearly an escalation, we're just stepping away from what is clearly really important work.
I mean, I think it kind of speaks a little bit to like the nature of government service here a little bit, which is the idea that there are hundreds of thousands of Americans patriotically doing work in the service of this country that don't ever get attention, right? They work in like organizations that have acronyms that most of us have never heard of until they're gone. CISA being one of them, right? And we introduced that in the news segment at the beginning of this. But like, I think to me, the ill that is here is that we've demonized service. We make servants into leeches instead of actually, which is talented individuals that are making less money than they would in the private sector for all of our benefit. that to me is the sin of the whole thing, which is it's just kind of gross that you have men and women doing patriotic work and we're making them into the bad guy.
Yeah, and it's like, there are places to make government more efficient without a doubt, right? There are improvements to be made. There are silly or ineffective programs that can
Hell
be
yeah.
slashed. But like you don't come in with you don't come I mean you come in with a just kind of with a chainsaw literally, right? And you seem like you're doing it just for the lulls. I mean not the way to go about this.
So I was going to ask you about politics too. I guess this is is this politics? I mean, clearly Doge was political. I mean, they're going to end up either not saving the government money or costing the government money, it seems. So it just strikes me as more or less a political stunt in some way. Is this the same? You put that in this. First of all, do you agree with that? And secondly, is this that?
I think everything's politics these days. You can't escape it, right? I mean,
Hmm.
can you name something that politics hasn't infiltrated? I mean, the NFL, the cybersecurity. I mean, what was it
Hmm.
last? The Weather Channel. I mean, it's everywhere and inescapable. So yes, I think the reason for CISA in particular is part political, part ideological, right? I think there's some people that just believe that like you policymakers, right? People in Congress that say, yeah, sure, maybe they're doing a good job, but I just don't like them having that mission. I think it should go somewhere else. And then there are other people that are mad at CISA for political reasons because their under the remit was also election security. And so, stomping on them is like a way to say, election security is a joke and these guys are a joke and let's stomp on them. So it's part ideological and part political, in my opinion.
Yeah,
That unlocked it for me. Sorry, go ahead.
yeah,
Mike.
it frustrates me on the everything is political. On the podcast, Neil and I have been talking a little bit about like I've been active as a Naval Academy alumni or alumnus in dealing with the fact that like the Naval Academy has been canceling speakers and banning books and a whole bunch of like stuff that's not right. And on my class page, there's been a lot of discussion about like, oh, this shouldn't be a place for politics. I'm like, well, if I'm not allowed to talk about the Naval Academy to other grads in my class because it's political, like everything has been politicized. And so like if we're just going to break down the wall of politicizing everything, we need to just get accepting of the conversation of that everything is political. But is there a different path in your mind about like how we can get back to this place of like good-hearted debate, but also like having like a kind of a central mission?
I do. I think maybe for a variety of reasons, the system has incentivized bad behavior. I think, especially at the elected level, I think that politics, in the purest sense of the word, is still functioning, right? I think Americans are still consuming information. Maybe some of it's wrong, maybe some of it's right, but they're consuming information. They are making decisions about what they think is best for them or for their country, and then they are acting or voting accordingly, right? And I think that's still functioning. I think the information they're receiving may be bad, and that may be driving bad decisions. But I think more importantly, the people that have been elected have now been incentivized to just behave badly, like I said, right? I mean, it used to be that like there was this sense of kind of dignity, right, and this sense of I don't know, almost like shame, right? Like, can you imagine some of the old, old people like, the famous leaders in the Reagan era or the, Kennedy era, I mean, just behaving like the people do now? No, they would be ashamed to behave that way, right? And the incentives don't work that way anymore, right? You don't get power and money by doing your job well, say in Congress anymore. You get that by being the noisiest and getting the most attention, and the people that are most annoying get the most attention. And so it's the incentives, I think, are backwards. And if we want to change that, we have to somehow change the incentives so that work product matters more than just acting like a fool on, social media.
That sounds like a tall task, but yeah, how do you go about that then? Like you change the incentive structure. Is that campaign reform or is it deeper than that?
Yeah, I mean, how much time do we have left here? Um, I mean, campaign finance reform would be huge. I mean, I don't, that would be a big one, right? Where the money flows is going to drive a lot of what happens, right? And another way that you can gain power in elective office is to raise a ton of money and spread that money amongst your colleagues and make sure they get reelected. And so the ability to raise money is critically important. And having attention is critically important to the ability to raise money. And so how do you get attention? Right. You're right back at being obnoxious. So I think the money part of it is big. I mean, the social media part of it is undeniably a problem, right? It definitely incentivizes bad behavior. That is a tough one to crack, especially here in the United States. And those are just two. I mean, there's probably a dozen more, but those are huge problems.
Yeah. So last week we had another Mike. We had so many Mikes on the show, but we had another. Well, he goes by Michael, so we differentiated that way. But he was at Twitter when Trump got banned from Twitter. He was also there when Twitter was purchased by Elon. He's been through that rigmarole, and part of what he described was sort of the algorithms being optimized by folks in Silicon Valley who are have one set of incentives. I think what you just described is another set of incentives by politicians, and it's almost like those two worlds are completely separate set of incentives that are driving us into a bad place, at least on the political spectrum. I don't know. Do you see any path out of that?
No, not at the moment. I mean, I think, and this is what gets me about the kind of, comments about, oh, this is all about free speech, which of course it isn't, right? It is not about free speech. There is someone tweaking an algorithm somewhere that is sending you the speech that they want you to see, right? That is the opposite. And so it's very disingenuous to say, oh, you can't do anything about this because it's free speech. I don't know. I mean, there are things that you can do about it, but there's just no will in this country to actually do any of those things, right? So I'm not sure. I'm not sure how you get out of it, and I'm not sure how you, practically speaking, change the incentive.
For me, it's one of the things I've learned out of the last few years is that, like, for effectively every institution that the American century was built upon is now broken in the 21st century. Whether it's the media, whether it's our political systems, whether it's our legal system, it's all so incredibly broken. The idea that the current president escaped legal repercussions for 4 years because we couldn't, justice delayed was justice denied in this particular case. And then he was able to get out of it based on like a Department of the Justice ruling, which is actually doesn't really carry force of law. It all just seemed very broken. Everything's so broken. And so the thing that occurred to me is that we have to rebuild every American institution for the 21st century. And that's not going to be happening in political leadership. That's going to be happening kind of from the bottom up. It really frustrates me about how much we have a set of rules that are for the wealthy and the well-connected, and a different set of rules for the people that aren't. And I think both political parties have been playing to that to a certain extent. Like that, there are definitely, you want to go after the Marjorie Taylor Greens of the world, et cetera, but she's not talking to the wealthy and the well-connected. And so it's interesting. If in the horseshoe theory, if you can get the Marjorie Taylor Greens and the AOCs to come together, talking about this, like, is there that for me is like, I'm interested in the emerging trend of that in the 21st century. Are we able to have something that's a populist without all the negative connotations of that word now?
Yeah, I mean, I think you've seen examples of like an AOC agreeing with the Ted Cruz, right, or Josh Hawley, right, agreeing with the populists on some of the big beautiful bill. So I do think that there is some of that. Mike, I think you're exactly right. I think it was, Ezra Klein has a whole line of discussion about this where, like, if only Democrats had been willing to admit that the system was a little bit dated and needed to be refreshed. If they were only willing to do that, then you wouldn't have Trump and the Republicans just ripping it out wholesale, right? And your example of the Justice Department speaks very loudly to me, right? My opinion, the Justice Department under the Biden administration was much more interested in the preservation of the Department of Justice as an institution than in the administration of actual justice. And then result is what we saw, right? And I think that's a great example of great and terrible example of something the Democratic Party has just been all about, just institutionalism for the sake of institutionalism. I'm going to go on just one little rant here.
Let's do it. Rant, dude.
I think the Democrats have been making a mistake by focusing too much on institutionalism. I also think they've been making a mistake by focusing too much on democracy. And I think that's a little bit, it may be shocking to hear me say that, but I'll tell you why I say that. It is, to many people, the means to the end and not the end, right? You have democracy so that you can have freedom, so you can have equality under the law, so you can be prosperous, so you can live in peace. And if it's not delivering to those things, then what's the point, right? It's like that line from No Country for Old Men, right? If the rule you followed led you to this, what good was the rule, right? So if you are someone who is living in a town that lost its industry, right? Maybe a town like Toledo, right, or where my wife's family's from, or Detroit, where your kids have moved away or are struggling with fentanyl overdoses, and there are no jobs and there are no prospects, and Democrats have been promising you, institutionalism, for the last couple decades. What is the point, right? What is the point of the Department of Justice? What is the point of trying to lecture someone about democracy if my kids are dying from fentanyl, right? It just doesn't make sense. And so I think when you have someone like Trump come along and say, look, I'm just going to fix this. I'm going to build a wall to keep the drugs out, right? And I'm going to, deport all the people that are taking your jobs, and I'm going to fix all these things. And yeah, I'm going to be a bit of an autocrat, but like, you're going to be able to breathe free air again, and you're going to have steel plants come back to your town again. Like, that sounds pretty good to those people, right? And it makes sense that it would sound good.
Mussolini, said he was going to make the trains run on time. It's the classic fascist playbook, frankly, which is we'll do these things. You're suffering. I know it. I'm the guy to fix it. Don't worry about those other people. But there's a danger in that, right? Which is like, yeah, the Democrats could have been doing a better job, but like, it's like the Democrat, but like the real problem is that we now, in my opinion, have an arsonist in the White House, like somebody who's just willing to burn the whole fucker down because it entertains him. And so that's the danger to me. And there's this component of like the Democrats being in this awkward position of like, as the progressive party, having to defend existing institutions because like they're trying to defend it against somebody that wants to burn it down. And so you end up with like these imperfect messengers that were focused on that are, bureaucratic in their approaches and institutionalists that like, incremental change, when you have this guy that's saying like the whole system's corrupt, burn it to the ground, we'll build something better. But his, arsonists don't build things, they just burn them.
Right. That's right. I mean, someone else said it. I'll just summarize it here. Like, I think people are asking for justice and Democrats are giving them the rule of law. And those are not the same. And then you have Trump come along and say, I'll give you justice. It's compelling. It's very compelling.
Well, so if this, this is the derivative of our politics being in everything, as we said before, and to some extent it's broken. Maybe it's really broken. What's an average guy to do? What does one do to make things better?
Yeah, I think just being engaged, right? I mean, we have a country that is modeled on civic engagement, right? Part of the other issue I think is that we haven't really discussed is people just don't interact like they used to, right? You guys have seen all this data that, memberships in various organizations have fallen off a cliff, and, belief and faith in institutions like everything from churches to the military to businesses to whatever is at an all-time low. And, people aren't going out anymore. Teenagers aren't going to parties anymore. I think just, I don't know that our country or our democracy or our government functions if people aren't participating and if people don't talk to each other. Mike, to your point, like, I think we should not be afraid to engage each other in, thoughtful discussion about these different issues. I don't think it functions otherwise. It's like, it's like how if you're in a car and someone cuts you off, and you're going to honk at him and scream at him and flip him the bird. But like if someone like walks in front of you, you would never do that, because they're right there in front of you and you can see them and see they're a human, and you would never behave that way. And I think that's kind of what's going on right now, is we just have lost a lot of that personability, and it lets us just behave like dicks to each other all the time. And it's very tiring. The other thing I wonder about, I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on this, is like how much of this is just a generational change. I mean, this country and the world has been dominated by baby boomers since like the Vietnam War. And, now they're slowly starting to kind of loosen up on the reins of power. And it's like this vacuum and people don't know what to do with it yet. So it could be that there's this generational handoff thing, and, it's going to happen once every 100 years or once every 50 years, and the country has to reinvent itself. So maybe there's some of that going on. But either way, just being engaged, right? And being an active, think about what it means to be a citizen, and take it seriously, and be engaged. One of the wonderful things about talk with veterans like yourselves is, what it means to be engaged in your country and in your community, and give a shit and care and serve. I think that's critically important.
Yeah, I think the boomers sometimes get a little bit of a bad rap here. I mean, like Trump's definitely a boomer, but I actually want to blame Gen X. Like their their whole reality bites kind of vibe on things of like
Gen X has like 5 people in it. It's like it's not a very big cohort.
I blame Neil is actually the reality here, but
at least once per show, I get blamed for something.
But no, I think about like the idea of like that. To your point, is like we lack this connection. We lack that kind of these third spaces. People have been talking about going out and just hanging out with your bros at the bar, and like checking in on them and making sure that they're not like talking to some fascist online that's trying to blame everything on women and immigrants. Like some poisonous pile of bullshit. But that
right. I mean, it used to be like if you were on the phone, if you were like talking to like a Nazi, that would be shameful. You would be shamed by this, right? Like that doesn't seem to exist anymore. I'm not sure why.
Well, my answer to that, I think, is news. It's you've alluded to this, Mike, that it's like where do we get information? And my trajectory here, I remember pretty clearly in 2003, 4, 5. I'd just gotten back from one of my tours to Iraq, and I was starting to question the media. How am I getting accurate information? So I sort of personally relate to how people start distrusting their news sources. And then as we've gotten these individual feeds that tell us what we want to know, we get pulled into these ecosystems, echo chambers, if you will. So Mike Smith, that is, I've actually had those conversations with a good buddy of mine. One of my closest friends in the military starts sending me whacked out shit from whatever frickin' place, corner of the internet. And I got to talk him back from the edge. So I don't, that's definitely, in my opinion, that is a key part of this. I sort of start from the position of like all of my military buddies, and I have family from the Midwest. They're all rational actors, given their set of information, given their reality that's painted for them by their set of news sources. They're making rational choices. And I think that's a compliment, not at all contradictory. I really like your example, Mike, of Trump is offering him justice. He's also, they're living in this reality that sometimes I can't even recognize. But I start with the premise that they're rational actors, and I'd probably make the same decision if I lived in their reality.
One thing that I've heard that could be promising is that increasing use of AI, in particular, like the large language models, is having a positive effect, believe it or not, on like real accurate information, because these things are trained to go out and try to figure out what's actually true, right? If you ask it a question about some event, it's going to try to figure out reputable sources and present to you accurate information. And so the result is that people that are using these things are getting more accurate information than if they were just literally Googling it or going on Twitter or whatever. And to the point where some advertising firms are actually saying, hey, we need to actually, the best thing we can do is get our information in a reputable news source now, like it used to be, 20 years ago, because that's going to populate Chat GPT when you ask it a question. So it could be that there's a technological solution to this, and it, maybe that's one of them.
Interesting. Yeah, I did find, just this last week, I read that SEO, search engine optimization, which is how you maximize your results in a Google search, is transitioning to GEO, which is, I'm going to forget the acronym now, but it's, I think, generative AI engine optimization or something like that. Anyway, shifting gears, we're close to the end here. Just wanted to catch up a little bit on, you've been in cyber for quite a while now. You're an industry expert. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're working on and where you're going next?
Yeah, happy to. So, for the last 5 or so years, I had been working at a cybersecurity risk and insurance company called Resilience. Still got my little swag. I have many of these. If anyone wants any, I have plenty. Great company. Worked with a lot of good people there. I've since moved on. And kind of planning my next thing. Nothing I'm prepared to announce on the show. Have me back next time. Maybe I'll make an announcement. In the meantime, I am kind of working with 2 nonprofits. I'm spending most of my time with them. The first is I'm on the board of a veteran service organization called Vets in Tech, which takes veterans and transitions them to careers in the tech sector. And we have a great success rate. I think we have about 100,000 vets in our network. We've placed about 90% of them in jobs, and our average starting salary is over 100K. So meaningful, well-paying jobs, and doing a lot of great work there. The other one is the Institute for Security and Technology, which is a national security technology think tank that I co-founded. I'm currently the board chairman of, and we're doing a lot of work in cybersecurity, a lot of work in AI, particularly with the intersection of AI and cybersecurity. And so, working mostly with those 2 things in the meantime.
Yeah. So I've been meaning to ask you about this for a while, because that the nonprofit you mentioned, the second one, some of their work was focused on nuclear proliferation, and I just sort of super curious about the thinking now that Trump is more or less rethinking the global order. Right? NATO doesn't matter anymore. Our alliances are much less solidified. We backed away from Ukraine, which is, maybe starts a domino effect of, world events. How has thinking on nuclear proliferation changed?
No, I mean, not for the better. I think, look, having a large military with the enormous expenditure that we have had, and the bases that we've had all over the world, and performing in some ways as the world's policeman, as people like to criticize us from time to time. You can take a lot of arrows to doing that, but the benefit is that the United States was the underwriter, the guarantor of kind of world peace, with numerous exceptions, of course. But if you start stepping away from that, right? Like, think about this. If you're, an incredibly capable nation like Japan, right? Or Poland or whatever, like, we were able to say, hey, you don't need to build up your military, right? We got you. We got bases right here. You don't need to build nuclear weapons. We got them. We got this handled. If anyone messes with you, like, we're here, we're going to get them. We're going to get your back, and we're going to deter them. And the result is, at least, no nuclear war, right? Ever, right? Since World War II. And if you start chipping away at that, right? If you start having countries question the faith of the United States, and question if we're going to be there to stand by our allies, then it becomes incredibly rational, maybe even a really good idea to start developing your own nuclear weapons. And look, if I were the national security advisor in Ukraine or Poland or Japan, I'd say we better start building nuclear weapons right now, or we could be next on the Russian or Chinese list. So I think it's destabilizing and could lead to more proliferation of nuclear weapons. Which the more nukes you have, the more likelihood you have of an accident or a war or something like that. So I think it's probably
especially since Ukraine gave up their nukes as part of a treaty between the United States, Ukraine, and Russia.
100%, 100%.
Well, sobering, but we're going to leave it there. Mike McNerney, thanks so much for being here. Really appreciate you sharing, and best of luck.
Gents, it was a pleasure. Yeah. Talk to you again soon.
Well, Neil, that might have been one of my favorite interviews. I really enjoyed meeting Mike. He clearly knows what he's talking about. It's kind of like a conversation with like a good friend, but also somebody that really knows his shit and isn't afraid to kind of pull some punches. It doesn't want to pull punches. Like, very plain spoken. I appreciated that about him.
Yeah, smart dude, and the breadth of his knowledge is also impressive. He knows a lot about a lot of things. So, but also, scary. I asked, a couple times we asked him, like, what do we do here? And if somebody had answers, if there were answers out there, it'd be him that had the answers. So, tough. I mean, we pose tough questions, of course, but
kind of got a couple of shrug emojis there, if you will.
Yeah. But we'll keep working through it. But yeah, a little, not the most positive picture moving forward on the political front.
Yeah, I think I've said this before. I'll say it again. I think you just got to work. It's like the environmentalists' maxim, about think globally but act locally. You can do a thing right now. Just go find a person that you can go work on a problem with. Like, it doesn't take more. Build a little community. Go work on a thing. I'd call faith, that it's all going to roll up into something built, more substantial for the next world.
Yeah.
So,
no, that's good. And I'll put my positive pants back on for a minute. I appreciate that. I appreciate you pointing out since I have had kids, I have been much more focused on the local. I think especially in the military, I had this very sort of global focus. And since having little ones, it's become like, what's going on in my street? What's happening in my community? How can I make my city better? And, there I feel much more empowered to actually do some, meaningful good right away. So anyway, for what it's worth, that's a good reminder. Thank you.
Okay. Well, now that you're back in a positive frame of mind, why don't you tell me about your goods, bads, and others?
Okay, good to go. My goods is this. I'm a summer kid, man. I love the beach. I am excited to do the summer activities. The barbecues, the beach time, the warm weather, the camping trips. I'm excited for it. So that's my good. My bad is Gaza. I mean, not to, I guess this is a total reversal on my, locally focused mindset, but man, we got to find a way out of that thing. I mean, it is awful on both sides. I understand why the Israelis are doing what they're doing. They're defending their people and securing their future, and they have a right to do that. It's also just awful to see the suffering on the other side. And we just need to find a way to move past the current situation. I don't have an answer. I'm not saying that people aren't doing enough. I just want to see, the suffering stop. And my other look, I'm going to point right back to the drone evolution, sort of Ukraine's attack deep into Russia. I asked Mike this, and I'll sort of tee it up again. I actually think this might be a turning point in the war, and I'm cautious about that. I don't think there's been any single event where I thought, yeah, it's it's going to tilt one way or the other. Russia is steadfast. Putin has no motivation to make a deal. there's a bunch of reasons why it's just gonna be status quo and more suffering for a long time. But if they can pull off another one of these or a couple of these, then that's real leverage. And the only way this thing is coming to an end is if one side gets leverage. So that's another I want to keep an eye on.
I like it. For me, I get a fun little, my goods, bads, and others. My good is I get to go to Sundance this weekend.
Whoa,
Yeah, so I got
that
invited
sounds fancy.
it is super fancy. I'm actually, I'm kind of like Ricky Bobby. I don't know what I'm going to do with my hands, you know? So, um,
Uh,
like I'm just kind of, I'm not used to this. So I got invited to speak on a stage about climate to members of the branded apparel industry, a bunch of leaders there. So there's a little bit of a conference, but it's mostly just a big networking event. I'm bringing Lindsay with me too, so it'll be kind of this chance for us to get away together. My mom's going to watch the kids. It's going to be fun for everybody. So yeah. So I'm going to go hang out at Sundance and see how the other half lives. The bad there is that my wife does kind of need to get away from some stuff, and that's my mother-in-law's health continues to deteriorate. She's just getting really weak. I continue to just be exhausted and furious with the American healthcare system. And we've talked about that before, but like a lot of well-meaning people operating in a system that's built to fail, and the failure costs, happiness and health. If I was conspiratorial, it would seem to suggest that it's built that way for profit. I'm not entirely sure of that, but I'm not entirely unsure of it either. So I think about that, and then the other, I bordered on actually calling this a good, but because it still has to pan out, so we're going to call it other. I'm watching it. Is we're hiring sales staff here at Acclimate. So the company's kind of in growth mode. We've identified like a segment. We're going after it. We have all the supporting infrastructure. And so we're looking for a young hustler that's out there that's ready to go help this climate tech company, go to the next level. We've got some aggressive growth goals for this year. If we do this, like we're gonna be in some fairly rare air. We've struggled to raise funding just for a lot of reasons, and this puts us on a path to charting our own future. So, a lot riding on this hire, and making sure that they're out there doing it, and then also not only the individual that we hire, but also like my theory of the case, which is like, yes, this is something that this person, when we hire them, they will be able to find success. And if they do, we're off to the races. And if they don't, now I've got to start scratching my head and figuring out what's going on here. So,
yeah, that's a big one. As a leader of a company, you got to make bets, but when you make a bet, that means you're going to take a deep breath and really put yourself out there. So good on you, man. That's hard. And I support.
Yeah, you know that feeling. You've only got so many chips to play, right? So like when you put one out onto the table, you got to make sure that that sets everybody up. So
for sure. Well, good luck.
Yeah, fingers crossed. So, but I'm excited about it. It's a big opportunity for us too. So
awesome.
Well, you want to read us out?
Will do. That's it for this episode of Hardpoints. Thanks for listening and being a part of the conversation around energy, national security, and the startup world. If you found today's episode useful or thought-provoking, make sure to follow us wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're feeling generous, share it on social media or send it to someone who'd appreciate it. Thank you again to Mike McNerney for joining us. Hardpoints is produced by Jordan Caruso and brought to you by the Valor Media Network. We'll see you next week.
Peace.